I'm wondering about fuel. You can maybe talk about that a little bit, but one thing in particular, a few years ago, Iceland had a plan to generate hydrogen from natural gas and fuel their fishing fleet with hydrogen. I don't know if you know anything about that. They're trying to be a zero emissions country because they've got all that geothermal and oil is just too expensive for them. And their fishing used to be one of their mainstays. So what are you doing about fuel and the price of fuel?
Most of us are complaining about it. And it may turn out, if current trends continue, it may turn out that the price of fuel is the only regulation we need on commercial fisheries. That could come to pass. It's a more and more significant cost all the time. For me, the trip south to get to the fishing grounds costs about $1,000 in fuel. Yeah, and that's just, hopefully it's not pure speculation to invest that in doing it. But clearly, if the price continues to do what it's been doing, we're going to have to be pretty efficient at catching, and we're not going to be able to look around in speculation as much. I didn't know about the Iceland thing. I did see an article in a fishing magazine about a guy in LA who has allegedly built his own hydrogen generator on the boat. That he's just kind of cobbled it into his existing engine and claims these big fuel economy gains and everything. We'll see how that pans out. If that is straight up and not just a pipe dream, more people will probably do that. There is one thing about hydrogen, of course. It is a very explosive gas. And one of the reasons we use diesels is because it's not. It's much safer on a boat to have a diesel engine than a gas on an enclosed, inboard engine, and that's part of the reason for us all using diesel engines. Hydrogen's a little scary, but boy, if there's an alternative to 4, 5, 6, who knows, $10 a gallon fuel, it might not be quite so scary.
I was wondering if you had explored the demand from selling your product on the dock side. You mentioned that you sell to a broker. Talk about that, if you would.
Sure. The typical thing is you sell to a fish buyer who is a wholesaler, and the broker is somebody else. The broker has several telephones and a little tiny office space. He never sees a fish, he never handles a fish, he just makes deals. But the fish buyer actually receives the fish at the dock. He's got the hoist, he's got the forklift, he's got the plant with the ice in it, and the boxes, and the trucks come to get them and take them wherever. I sold for a while to a guy whose plant was located because of its proximity not to the fishing grounds but to the Oakland airport, because he shipped most of his fish by air. Some people direct market. Marketing is a whole different game from catching, but some people do that and get a premium for it. Some people are taking advantage of the web to do that, and that may become more common. But I suspect that the bulk of the fish are going to go through fish buyers for quite a while.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Don, please.
You guys need to stretch or anything? I might put you to sleep. But I appreciate being asked to be here. When we talked about it, Jeff and I, we talked about this last week. Who can we get to come and speak here? And I said, well, I'll do that. I fished most of my life. And so I really went through quite a bit of thinking and praying and processing before I came here tonight. And all the while I was painfully aware of the loss that we've suffered as Klamath people with the loss of our fisheries. And from that perspective, it's I believe I'm only a remnant of what Creator intended me to be as a climate person. And we as a people have suffered a lot. And our fisheries are so important to us. I've also had to go through a lot and realize that I'm getting older, you know, that to even be doing this thing, representing my people. I'm kind of moving on in my life, and I'm sharing things I've learned from my father, from elders, from fishermen that I've met on the river, from elders when I used to take the fish to them, you know, the things that they shared with me. I learned about my people and why fish are important to us. So I knew I had to take some notes to make sure I could stay on track, and I really wanted to share from my personal perspective. You know, I've learned a lot, as I said, from my people, my father. I mean, he's one of the main reasons I fish and I hunt. Still do that today, and teach the young people and my grandchildren to do the same. It's because of that, and I actually believe there's a call on my life to be that, and to be who I am here today. And so I'm honored to be here and represent my people from that perspective. And I want to do my best and share from my heart and my experience, because what I've learned is important. And I believe, even though it's from my perspective and my story, it's similar to a lot of our people. We have some core beliefs and traditions and values and perspectives around who we have been and who we are and who we need to be in the future. And we share those things despite everything that's happened to us, despite all the loss. That still survives today. And that was affirmed to me as I thought of my life, thought of my father, and thought of our people, and thought of why we do what we do and why we believe the way we believe. So I knew I'd be a little bit emotional because it is, it's my life. I'm so thankful to be the son of my father, Gene Gentry, and thankful that he was raised the way that he was raised on the river, catching the twom and the cockatoo in the end for his family and for the elders and the people in our community, and catching the mayhaws, our trout, the red band trout, the beautiful red band trout, which is our only really native fishery that we have, because the salmon has also been denied to us when the dams went in 1917. We can no longer catch our cheetahs, our salmon. We have our stories, we have our culture, we have our legends that tell us about all these fish. And as you can even see from the testimony and the posters that we brought and displayed, those fish are important to our culture and our lifestyle and our subsistence. And, I wanted to share a few things that maybe I hope will help you to understand why these fish are still important to us, and why we as a people have intentionally reaffirmed our culture, our belief, our worldview, our lifestyle as being valid even today, and why we work so hard to restore what has been lost to us, why we work so hard to restore our fish, because that's who we are. I'm talking the Numu, the Yuskin band, the Snake Indians, the Paiute people, the Modoc people, the Yusikni Mukluks, the Klamath people. We're all people of lakes, marshes, and rivers, as is pointed out. We truly believe that we are placed here And we were placed here for a purpose. Our creation story tells us this. And I believe this firmly, that we're here, placed here, Creator placed us here for a reason, and we're not going anywhere. We're never going to go away. This is where we live, this is where we want to live, and this is where I believe Creator wants us to be. That's a part of our legends and culture and our stories, and I believe that's even affirmed in the Bible itself. In Acts, it talks about God creating the people of the earth and establishing the bounds of their habitation. I believe that's true. The great Creator is Ron referred to. We have different names for him, Kumukaps. That's old man of the ancient times, or Blaidalkni, the one from above. That's what we call Creator. We believe in a Creator, and He revealed Himself to us through creation, and we sought Him, and through our ceremonies we sought Him, and we believe Creator taught us how to live the way that we needed to live. And our people, historically, each and every one in our community had a role. The grandparents, the parents, the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, the brothers and sisters. And our role was so connected to the use of these lands. And because of what happened to us and the changes that were brought upon us, in the loss of our resources, our role as men was significantly affected. We suffer a lot of issues, like many people around the world, because of what's happened to us, because the things that brought upon us, as Ron referred to, our connection to who we are and who Creator intended us to be has been compromised. And that's what I meant by saying I'm fully aware that I'm only a remnant of what Creator intended me to be, because I can no longer catch those salmon that I should be able to catch. The Creator placed here and made us stewards of and taught us to take care of. I can no longer catch the chwam as I once did when I was young, and take it to the elders and share that and do as my father taught me, to catch these fish for the people. Even to have who you're going to take those fish to when you catch them. I'm still able to do that to some degree with our mayhaws, with our trout. And I'm thankful that I have friends downriver that let me fish side by side with them, and that will trade fish or salmon for my deer and my elk. And I've been able to fish side by side with them and just appreciate that and be thankful for that. But also, I'm aware of the fact that we can no longer fish here at home as we once did, as we should be able to. So I'm aware of that loss. I wanted to share a story about my grandson. And my grandson, I'm really proud of him, because I taught him as my father taught me, and as the elders taught me, and the other fishermen taught me to fish and to hunt. I was there when he caught his first fish. I was there when he killed his first buck. He's not killed an elk with me yet, but that's coming soon. And I taught him those things, and my wife and I and our family, we affirm who we are as Native people and who we've been. We know that we even live in these places where our people caught salmon and caught the chwam, just really close to us. And I know those places. I stood on the river with my family. We prayed for the salmon to be returned to the place where we used to catch those historically, just near where we live. But I taught my grandson who he is. He comes from a line of fishermen. He comes from a line of spiritual people, of leaders. And he knows who he is, and he has that heart. He's a hunter and he's a fisherman. And because of that, in knowing who he is, he's successful in his life. I'm really proud of him. He talks with young and old. He honors me and his parents and people in the community. He knows who he is, and because he's connected to who he is through the exercise of his culture, and that was shared today in different ways, and we believe as a people, as a clan of people, we need to have that. We've seen that connection to who we are and how important that is, how we need to affirm that we are important in this world, that we have a place and a purpose, and we're connected to this land. I wanted to share a story. My grandson was 4 years old, and this is after he caught his first fish. He was fishing with me right where we have our return to Tuam ceremony, which was reinstituted in 1990. Because of the Tuam being endangered, the Lost River sucker, we can't catch those fish anymore, but we were catching trout, and I had about 5 or 6 pound trout that I landed already, and we were catching more for our family, and I snagged our chwam, one of the chwam right into the back, and I was really blessed when I reeled it in, because last time I was catching the chwam, they were mostly old fish. We didn't see very many young fish, at that time, and in the early 80s. And handle fish them when we were trying to find out what was going on with them, what was going on with the population. But to see this young Lost River, I think it may have been its first year coming back up to spawn, I'm not certain, but it's fairly young fish. I was pleased. And my grandson was all excited. He said, he'd seen the chwam. I used to take him and show him in the fish ladders that they were. He'd seen them jumping when we were trout fishing, and he'd seen them numerous times, and saw him at the return to Tuam ceremony. But I reeled it in, and I'm going to have to return this fish, grandson, and he goes, why? I said, well, because they're on an endangered species list. We can't catch these fish anymore because there's not enough of them to reproduce, to make sure that they're going to be here into the future. We've got to release this fish so they can repopulate and come back, and maybe there'll be so many more that we can catch them again and eat them again as we once did. And I still remember the look on my grandson's face. He was excited for seeing the fish and catching it, and he was like, just didn't quite understand that. And when I released that chwam, he just looked up at me and he said, Grandpa, I can't wait till we can catch and eat those fish again. And that was a painful thing to me, and to realize that when I've lived through a generation of our people haven't been able to experience, they weren't able to catch those fish and take it to the elders and hear the stories and hear why they like the Part2 over the chwam, or tell me these stories and talk of the old days when we had the big fish feeds at the Winston River Indian Mission Church and around the communities, and how they would eat the eggs and mix it in with the regular chicken eggs. And I remember those times. I remember going in and smelling chwam heads boiling, Mary's grandmother. But she loved the Part2. She wanted me to get caught to her all the time. But I experienced that. But when I released that fish and told that to my grandson, I was just aware that he may not be able to experience that. And there's a lot of our people, young people today, that don't have that connection. Maybe they see the fish jump, or they might see them at the return of Tuam ceremony or in the fish tanks up at the hatchery research facility, but they've never caught them and eaten them as I have, on the river, over a fire with my people. And shortly after that, you know, I told them about our salmon, and that we once had salmon that used to come up here, and right to that very place. And I told them about the dams going in, and the fish not coming up as they once were. And he knew about my job and what I'd done and how I worked for the Natural Resource Department, and how I was focused in trying to help bring that back to our people once again. And, so I fully believe that we need to have these fish not only as subsistence because we have health issues, but we need to have these fish because that's who we are and Creator intended us to be, and it's right. Without these fish, something's wrong. We know it's wrong. God placed them here for a purpose. And if it's to establish friendships and relationships and work through hard issues, and to love our neighbor as ourselves, to honor Creator as our stories tell us to. I mean, even the Return of Chuan ceremony, it's all about honoring Creator first before we can catch those fish. You know, our legends and stories tell us that we're to do this. And I always remember when one of the elders I used to take Chuan and drop. When I heard what she suggested about our Return to Chuan ceremony, it just warmed my heart, and I knew it was right. What she said is, we used to have this ceremony, this Return to Chuan ceremony. It hadn't been done for quite a while. We need to do that again. It's all well and good to have biologists and spend all this money and work with everybody to try to restore the fish, but we need to do first things first. We need to do that ceremony. We need to honor Creator. We need to thank Him for what He's provided for us and pray for the return of those fish and pray for the people. You know, that's why we did that. We prayed for the people. And I just thought that was a wonderful thing. So we do that ceremony, and it's a part of who we are. And we're praying for those fish to return because they're important to us. This is a little bit of my story. I know Jeff, I know other tribal members, fishermen that are here have their own story and their understanding. And I think it's probably pretty similar and parallel, but different. So I wanted to share that. And I thank you for the opportunity, and hope you have a better understanding of why we fight for restoring those fish, and why we want the salmon back, why we want the Chuan back. It's right, and we need those fish to be who we are.
I think if I remember right, Ron, you were saying you do cast net fishing, is that right?
Dip net, yes.
Dip net, sorry.
Right.
I'm curious, the Klamath tribe, are you just using contemporary methods, and if so, what would have been traditionally?
Well, right now, because we only have a trout fishery, we use hook and line, but we also spear them too, spearfish and gaff them. But traditionally, the Chuan were so plentiful. We actually modified the river, and actually there's a legend where Creator actually took off his necklace and laid it in the river and made a fish weir. Taught us how to direct the fish to where we could actually just stand there and just kind of throw them out on the bank. The Chuan, we speared them, we netted them, but they were so plentiful for our Chuan, almost anyone could catch them. And I remember the young kids walking through Chiloquin with the big Chuan, taking it with the big smiles on their face to their families, and that's something that I miss. Salmon, same way, we would spear them and net them just about every easy you could.
Just kind of following up on that, I've heard some stories about when there were so many in the river, and then can you kind of tell about how there was those families on the bank and the women and people taking the fish and putting them on the, do you know what I'm talking about?
Okay.
Well, I can share, my story is a little bit different because my parents divorced when I was young, and I came back to live with my dad in 1969, and he just felt like we needed to know how to fish and take care of our people. And I remember the first time I went down to the river, this very same place where I told the story about my grandson. We were down there, and there were non-tribal fishermen there too. They were snagging the fish. They used spark plugs and big treble hooks, and they were snagging the chwam and catching them that way. There were fewer at that time, and I remember meeting the Plenty Wright family on the river, and Councilwoman Georgie Nelson was there, and her brothers, and Plenty Wright, and that's the first time I remember eating the fish fresh right on the river. There were numerous tribal members, non-tribal members. There were people from Weed. There were some African Americans from Weed that would come up and catch them. They'd take them back in their gunny sacks, and so cooked in the native just right there on the river. And my wife tells a story too. Her family, they'd go on the river. They would make a day and just go down there and catch fish and eat them right there on the river. That's the way a lot of the people did it. But people took them and tried them, cummels as dried chwam. And you could grind that to make a soup out of it, or you could eat it that way. People smoked them and canned them, baked them, boiled the heads.
This question is mostly for Ron. At least I'd like to hear Ron's answer first. But I'm curious from the other panelists as well, your opinion on the place of hatcheries and salmonids, or is there a place?
Wow, boy, you're getting right to it. Hatcheries. Hatcheries have a huge impact on our native fishery at Ishpishie Falls. When I was a child, a few years back, Iron Gate Dam got put in '65. I was born in '62. Some of my first memories are down there packing fish out down at Ishpishie Falls. And that was tough. We'd be done fishing by September. All of our people that wanted fish had fish. Our ceremonial, we fished for the ceremonies and things like that. It's a sacred fishery. But now, since '65, since the hatchery, it was explained to me at a young age that there used to be 8 runs of Chinook fish. How to say 8 runs of salmon that used to go up through Ishpishie Falls. Now we have one major run. Comes in after Labor Day. I'd be done before Labor Day back in the day. That's the hatchery run. Before they made amendments to their hatchery plan, they used to just go put out 6 million fish in the river and let them all go to the ocean. And what that would do is just create a barren landscape for the native fish. We all know that hatchery fish aren't as smart, aren't as reproductive, all these different things, inadequate, but all these inadequate fish come in and just rape the river clean for food. So we all know, fishery people know, the bigger you are when you're at the estuary, the better, the better off you are. You're going to come back and make it the spawning grounds. So now we have a little bit of poultry run before Labor Day, kind of a poultry run a little bit before the hatchery comes in. Hatchery comes in for 2 weeks. Then we have a little poultry, and our season's done. Back in the day, it was explained to me, by the way of our ceremonies, allowance of our ceremonies to fish, we'd be able to fish out of Ishpishie Falls after the ceremony, and that'd be in late July approximately. It was on a 13 lunar cycle. And that point, and we'd be fishing for July, August, September, October, and sometimes in November, depending on what type of water year. So we're going down from 4 months of optimal fishing to basically 3 weeks of optimal fishing. To me, I attribute that to the hatcheries. the hatcheries have its importance in the river system right now? Of course it does. So there's a lot of issues there. Let the biologists figure that out, but that's my reasoning from a culture perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to share too, and it relates to what Ron was talking about ecology and the system and realizing that everything works together. And, that's the way it should be. The fish need to be reproducing, whether it's the twaham or the salmon. They need to be doing what they were created to do and what they've done for years, and to reproduce naturally. So the key is really restoring the system and restoring a function of the rivers and the streams in the manner they need to be. It provides all those other related food and all those related habitat form, structure. All those things need to take place, and so the fish could take care of themselves naturally. We know we were concerned early on when we were looking at the twam and the Part2, that we could very easily, maybe in a hatchery, select a few fish out of the river and maybe introduce inferior fish, because the numbers were so far down. In fact, we had some concerns about hybridization. You could actually see physical characteristics of some of the fish that was, similar. You could see traits of the yen with Part2 and so forth. So we were concerned, and some of that actually the geneticists and the folks think maybe some of that is a part of the survival mechanism, the ability to do these kind of things. So fact is, when you have a few fish and you put them in an artificial condition and you raise them and continue to do that, you might be raising fish that really won't survive in the manner that they need to. But, how things work with natural selection and so forth. So, just philosophically, I have some real struggles with it myself. I think the solution is to fix what's wrong so they can take care of themselves.
I think hatcheries are a symptom. If we had healthy rivers, we would not need hatcheries. Didn't need hatcheries before we started messing up our once healthy rivers. But in this state, every salmon hatchery is located below an impassable barrier dam. There's a lot of different, I don't disagree with a lot of what Ron and Don said, but I also consider that those hatcheries may be the custodians of that genetic material of those fish until those dams are gone. And I don't think we should ever put ourselves in a position where we rely totally on a hatchery stock because of the problems that Ron and Don alluded to and other problems with hatcheries. One they didn't mention is they're totally dependent on funding. Hence, they're totally dependent on politics and the economy. If we relied totally on hatcheries and then came to decide, well, we just can't afford it, sorry, but we can't afford it this year, and that's all we had, gee, guess what? We don't have any more salmon. So we need natural runs. We need the healthiest natural runs that we can figure out how to have. As long as we have these impassable barrier dams in place, I believe there's a role for hatcheries. And I think it's always appropriate to scrutinize what's being done in the light of what we've learned since the last time we scrutinized it and try to improve the way they operate in terms of not selecting for one portion of the run, in terms of doing whatever they can to maintain the genetic diversity, etc. I'd point out that if they release the fish at 90 to the pound, and those fish come back, and they weigh somewhere between 9 and 30 pounds when they came back, they grew on their own. From the time those eggs were laid and fertilized in the hatchery until the hatchery released those fish. They're protected. They're protected from a lot of natural factors, and I'm confident that a lot of the fish the hatcheries release are inferior and are very quickly called out by predators or by their own inability to feed because they're inferior. But those fish go to the ocean quite small, they come back quite large. For 2 or 3 years in the ocean, they had to avoid being eaten, and they had to eat. And when they come back, 1 or 2% or whatever, I don't believe those are inferior fish. Those are 98, 99th percentile fish, and I was never in a class where that wasn't an A. The other thing that's different for hatchery fish, and a place to be cautious, is once they enter the hatchery, they're no longer selected for their fitness to spawn, as they are if they're spawning in gravel. And that's a concern. That's a real concern. It's quite possible through generations of, especially if they're pure hatchery fish, for the fish to lose a lot of their genetic capabilities that they should have. So it's a very mixed bag. If I seem to be treading carefully down both sides of the fence on this issue, it's because as a commercial salmon fisherman, I told you how we rely on Sacramento fish. That is almost purely a hatchery run these days, because the naturally produced fish are not getting out of the Delta alive. Those fish require 3 stages of human intervention to get to the ocean alive. They have to be hatched and raised in a hatchery. They have to be trucked past the Delta pumps, and then once they get to the estuary, it helps a lot if they are released into net pens for a few hours so that they can acclimate to the brackish water and not be easy prey for striped bass and birds as soon as they're released from the trucks. 3 stages of human intervention, and that is a sign that we have really messed that river and that delta up bad. But that's what our fishery depends on. It's pretty scary.
I mentioned earlier, the pleasing aspect of bringing home venison, elk, steelhead, and unfortunately, in most of our Oregon rivers, the only way to bring home a steelhead is if it's a hatchery fish, it's thin clipped, and so yeah, sure, I might sound like a hypocrite. I like that aspect of that, to be able to do that for my family, that provide a little bit of sustenance. On the other hand, I don't have the scientific data to prove it, but I would say over the last few decades, 3 out of every 4 fish that I've ever landed, with whether it's a spin rod or a fly rod, are wild fish. And oftentimes in rivers where 3/4 of the run is hatchery. So you can kind of do the math on that. From my perspective, I guess just bank fishing or wade fishing, the fish that I catch that seem to be more aggressive to a fly or bait or gear are wild fish. And so I guess in our view, we look at the hatchery being used maybe as a tool for restoration. Hopefully someday the Klamath Basin here. The Elba River up in the Olympic National Park, June hogs, 80 and 90 pound Chinook, that's a distinct possibility. Hatcheries might be useful in restoration there once those dams come out. But hatchery should never be an excuse to manipulate or degrade the habitat of wild fish. That's what's going to help us in the long run if we want to pass this on to our kids and beyond, is habitat for wild fish.
It was really meaningful hearing from, particularly the tribal perspective on just the loss that's occurred, as well as just the personal and cultural interaction and deeply intense relationship with the fish and how that's affected. But I was curious to hear a little bit more from you, Dave, when you talk about how many fishermen have had to quit, and just perhaps to speculate a little bit if that things got really bad and you had to, or perhaps others that you've known that have had to leave. just the relationship with the fish and the whole industry, how does that tend to affect people in your line of work, or how might it affect you if you had to quit?
That's kind of a tough question for me to answer because the way my life is, when people drop out, I don't see as much of them anymore. And in a lot of cases, I don't really know how they make up for that loss in their life. One good friend and mentor who left the fishery went to work in the field of fish restoration. And so he managed to keep his hands slimy, if you will, by doing that. But a lot of people just go into completely other things. And we enter the fishery by choice. And sometimes we leave it not by choice, but for commercial fishermen, as essential part of our life and our way of life as it is, we do have the option to change and go do something completely different. And there are other people, tribal members especially, who may not have that option if they lose the opportunity to fish. For myself, I don't know. I'll do it as long as I'm legally and physically and mentally able to do it. I'll do it. And I don't know what happens when that's no longer true.
My question is almost the opposite of Andy's. I'm wondering if we can hear from the panel what it would mean to you if things improve and the trauma and the crop do the back and the salmon and the
You know, fish is a part of our subsistence, also. And, I was raised eating fish and even though a lot of us have jobs, I still fish and take fish to our people, and it really supplements our income and subsistence, and I think it's healthy for us. So I believe that we'd be a healthier people. I believe we'd have an opportunity to exercise our culture and traditions and teach our young people again how to take care of the fish. I mean, when you catch them, that's when the work begins, And so to me, it's really important. It's important for our total emotional, spiritual, physical well-being. So that's what it means to me.
Just real quickly. We did a denied access to traditional food report back in 2005, I believe. And basically, I alluded to it earlier, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, 3-4 times the national average. So if we have more salmon, obviously we're going to be a little bit less fish pills and eating more salmon, going out and exercising a little more, and things like that. But in a spiritual sense, I think there would be great revival in the social morals that would be displayed more at the youth level, meaning that they're going to be taught our ceremonial values much younger. If not, right now, maybe they're not even getting taught at all because the resources are there available to us. That's not part of our life. It comes back to part of our life. Then we start teaching, and now all of a sudden, you have more people here. Maybe there'll be more people with me right here today. But more of a spokesperson, people talking about what I talk about. We're a big family, but in a sense of the message getting out, it's a small message, but I think that message would expand with more resources to utilize to make us who we are.
I think if we can do that, if we can make that happen, I think there would be a powerful sense of renewal and hope and possibility for the future that might ripple far beyond the boundaries of Klamath Basin.
We don't always like to hear it, we try to teach our kids, moms and dads try to teach our kids that, to do what's right and not what's easy. And for me as a dad, restoration is doing what's right and not what's easy.
So this actually is more of a comment than a question. When we have these conversations about what we expect to happen when the Klamath dams come out, we always talk about salmon coming back up here. Well, we really need to be thinking an awful lot about steelhead coming back up here as well. And nobody said it tonight, and I just didn't want you folks to leave without at least hearing it once. So, it's the trout that are up here now that'll start running to the ocean again, or the steelhead that are downstream recolonizing, or both. And I think some of our most significant potential up here is for steelhead. And so, don't forget.
Don't forget the eels, don't forget the sturgeon, and don't be kidding Pacific lamprey, I guess, instead of eels. But I think that's where we're at. The diversity, and salmon isn't the main thing because there's a whole array of species along the riparian corridor that we use for basketry material or ceremonies, all these different things based on a river's ecology. So again, Larry, good point, because a salmon just doesn't live alone. It has, there's all these habitat that is shared, and so there's symbiotic relationships out there. What are they? We need to find out a better, a better way of looking at the river's ecology for those answers.
I just had a question about that. I started thinking about the hatcheries. And I know you guys are all hatchery folks, but does anyone know if in the fish hatcheries, if they also give them antibiotics and things like that, like they do our non-organic other animals, like, you saw that?
Come on,
They
Larry.
give antibiotics and they do that kind of stuff too. Larry?
Well, I think it's fairly common practice in hatcheries all over the place.
Again, I don't know precisely what the practices are at Iron Gate, but hatcheries. I wanted to jump up and babble for 15 minutes about that one when it came up. But hatcheries are not such great things. It's fairly impressive that we've developed the technology to raise fish, sort of domesticate lines of fish, and keep runs going. But boy, if we get a system to the point where it can't sustain fish anymore, or all we have, naturally produced fish, that is, and all we have left is hatcheries, I think they're doomed. We'll hiccup, we'll get disease problems is one of the big risks. You get those fish in a hatchery and boy, the wrong kind of disease gets in there, it can really be devastating. So yeah, if anybody who's interested in something like that, go to any aquaculture supply, any sort of commercial aquaculture supply website and look what they sell. And it's a fair bet that that's what's landing in fish raceways. And there's all sorts of antibiotics and treatments for various diseases.
First of all, I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight on behalf of Prosper. And I want to thank the panel for sharing their thoughts and their words with us tonight. I think you can see from the words that were spoken here tonight, there's a tremendous amount of diversity in the Klamath Basin, the Klamath River Basin. I couldn't help but when I was listening to Dave talk about the impacts that his community was suffering when the Sacramento had a problem, and all of a sudden that problem reverberated 700 miles up the coastline, and all of these commercial fishermen got displaced. For Dave to make a living, Dave had to take his boat and head out hundreds and hundreds of miles away from where he wanted to be. It made me think about a few years ago, well, maybe not even that long ago, when my neighbors here in the Upper Basin also had to leave their farms because there wasn't water.